It happened. It did. And it always happens when you least expect it. I'm talking about love. I'm in love. I am. I'm in love with the Technics SU-G700 integrated amplifier, and I don't care who knows it. Now, Technics is a brand that a lot of us remember from our past. Now, unless you are a DJ, the bulk of their products have kind of faded into the annals of history, but they made some killer turntables right up into the point that they disappeared. They disappeared from the market, and not that long ago, but their parent company, Panasonic, has decided to bring them back, and bring them back with gusto, because the G700 integrated is part of a small but very carefully selected lineup of products that include amplifiers, include speakers, include new turntables, as well as a few digital source components, i.e. CD players / streamers. And they are available kind of at all of these different price points. There is a line above the G700 here, but this kind of sits in the middle of their line. There's some products that are a little bit less expensive than there's this, and then they have some more kind of cost no object options. But I gotta tell you, at around $2,500, the SU-G700 here is just, it's class defining. It really, really is. And for me, it has come into my life and set a new benchmark from which everything now has to be judged. Because prior to its arrival, I really hadn't found anything outside of my Crown amp with preamp combination that enticed me to want to leave that pairing behind. Because nothing really was night and day better or different. Yes, there were differences. Yes, I could say, well, that's a little bit better. I like that. But on a whole, I was supremely happy, and have been supremely happy with my decisions to stick with the Crown and preamp of choice, which in this case is a Marantz. But then the Technics came along. It's so well put together, and the detail, the attention to detail with this machine is such that it is just so refined and so utterly infectious in its sound that I honestly have not listened to anything else but the G700 since its arrival. I don't want to unplug it. I don't. So what does the G700 sound like? Well, it sounds like nothing at all. It sounds like nothing at all. It is the quietest amplifier or integrated amplifier I have ever had in my system, full stop. Absolutely, without a doubt. It is dead nuts silent. And out of that silence comes a sound that is so effortlessly clear. I don't want to use analogies like, oh, it's like someone took Windex to the window and everything was... It's not like that, because that implies a certain glassiness, a certain harshness or sheen. It's just neutral. Completely and utterly neutral and nuanced. So unbelievably nuanced that every time I sit down to listen to it, every time I watch a movie through it or listen to an album through it, and no matter what source I choose, I get the absolute best out of my system via the G700, and that is its strength. And this really is a modern component despite having such vintage flair. And what I mean by that is, yes, it is a digital amplifier, and it takes isolation and noise to such an nth degree that it is just, it begs belief. And the fact that on top of that, there are killer DACs built in, an awesome phono stage, and if you're a headphone user, a truly, truly remarkable headphone amp all built into this $2,500 very stylish chassis makes this thing not only a centerpiece in the system, something that invites you to want to listen. And listen you will do, because the sound that comes out of this is so utterly refined and effortless in its rendering that it begs belief. Because it is silent, because the noise floor is zilch, zero, non-existent. Put your ear inside my tweeter, you're not going to hear hum. And because of that, all the dynamics are just a little bit better. All of the separation in the soundstage is just a little cleaner. And the soundstage is that much more refined, that much more defined. Dynamics are a little punchier. High frequencies have a little bit more air, sparkle a little brighter. In mid-range, in terms of timbre and palpability and weight, oh my God, it's amazing. It's utterly amazing. And it doesn't matter what you're listening to because the sound is always true to the source. This is among the more uncolored amplifiers I've ever heard. And despite only having 70 watts of power at its disposal, this thing rocks. It can play loud. And it can power virtually any loudspeaker on the market today, save for maybe if you have some electrostatics or panels like Magnapan. But if you have traditional dynamic driver speakers, this thing rocks. I love it. I love it. It's built like fine audio jewelry. Like I said, it has that vintage flair that is so in vogue right now and that I think will make this a much, much more timeless piece compared to the competition. And the fact that it has that kind of Technics pedigree that you remember from back in the day just makes it super freaking cool. Now, for as good as the DACs are and as good as this is and that is, there are a few things that it does lack compared to the competition in that it has no streaming capability of its own built in. There's no Bluetooth, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no way to connect this thing to your network and let it be an all-in-one sort of hub. And for some of you, that may be a deal breaker, but for others that already have third-party pieces that allow for this functionality, you're just going to connect them the way you would any other component and be off and running. The G700 does have sort of an auto calibration feature in the LAPC, or load adaptive phase calibration, and that is basically the amp adapting to whatever loudspeaker you have chosen to connect to it. Now, some people have talked about this feature as being revolutionary, and maybe it is technologically speaking, but in terms of like totally changing the signature of the amplifier, changing the sound of your speakers, it's not going to do that. Are there going to be some improvements? Yes, they are slight, and you will hear them, but we're talking about going from, say, here to here. It matters. You don't have to run it, and it's easy enough. You just push a button, the thing runs, it lasts about 3 minutes, and you're off and running. But if you were to change speakers, you will have to run it again. But it is easy. It does go from here to, here in terms of performance, and why wouldn't you? You've paid for it. It's built into the amp. But life-changing it is not. But again, what is so unique about this amplifier and what makes it so special is all of the digital wizardry that Technics has brought to bear in one chassis, from the amplifier section to the power supplies to the DACs to the way it cancels certain circuits that aren't in use just to cut down on noise, to its awesome phono stage, to even having a headphone amp. I mean, the G700 is amazing. It is truly, truly a work of audiophile art. Now, it's $2,500, and I get that. $2,500 is not going to be for everybody, and in many cases, that is cost prohibitive. But I would argue that if you can stretch the budget, if you can make this fit, this may be the last two-channel amplifier that you will ever purchase. In which case, that makes it a bit of an investment. And a good one at that, because it does have digital inputs. It has analog inputs. Like I said, it has a phono stage, headphone amp. I mean, really, the only thing that this thing is missing that I wish it had was some form of Wi-Fi connectivity or internet or Ethernet or network connectivity, and maybe an HDMI port or two, because I do feel like the integrated amp world is going to largely be comprised of products now and in the not too distant future that have that functionality. And the Technics does mean that you have to bring some third-party gear to the equation. But for me, I really enjoy connecting it to my television via an optical cable and letting it kind of be my two-channel receiver to my speakers for TV viewing that way. And then I connect all of my other source components to its analog inputs, and it just sounds fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. There is actually nothing more I can really say about its performance other than I love the thing. I absolutely do. Dynamically, it's beautiful. Timbre, tonality, textural, it's as neutral to the source as any amplifier, any digital amplifier I have ever heard. And it surprised me that for 70 watts of power output that it was digital, because when we think digital amps, we think high power, and 70 watts is kind of on the modest side. And yet it is 70 watts that drive my JBL L100s to absolute perfection. And I have no doubt that if you had similar speakers or lesser speakers or even higher end speakers, that the Technics SU-G700 wouldn't drive them equally well. So that's it. That is my review of Technics' amazing SU-G700. It is my new amplifier benchmark. Obviously, you can spend less and get high performance, but as far as amplifiers are concerned, this is one of the better ones. This is one of the best that I've had the privilege of being able to live with and demo, and it is now my hope in life that I can figure out a way to keep it, because I really, really don't want it to go anywhere. I'm that smitten kitten over it. So what do you think of the Technics SU-G700? Is this an amplifier on your bucket list? Is this on your wish list? Do you own it? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. And you know, as I always say, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So until the next video, everybody, happy listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.